Chapter 632, Explanation of the Incident. We didn't kill anything. The elves all had shocked expressions on their faces, and understandably so. They had just been told by Ray that they never killed the boss monster. They also never killed any of the other monsters on their way out. Why would I let them take such precious EXP away from me? I killed the boss and the other monsters to further test out my and manage to level up and get more skills. Unfortunately, the monsters in the dungeon were not as diverse as the ones he encountered in the royal dungeon. Perhaps it was due to lack of conquest on the part of the elves, which led to stunted evolution, or the abundance of resources for the monsters. Or several other factors that Ray couldn't possibly know, but the monsters in the dungeon were very similar to each other and had similar skills. Of course, that didn't mean all of them were the same. However, several floors had an overlap of monsters unlike what he saw in the royal dungeon. As a result, I could only get a limited number of skills in my stockpile. Most of them are just there to fill up space too, but it's better than just having 14. If he ever got the chance to get his hands on more useful skills and needed space, he could always feed the current ones to or use on them. Either way, he lost nothing by having them at the moment. Also, thanks to the upgrading effect of his, all the skills he obtained were at least in the absolute tier. The main highlight was the EXP I obtained from the experience. At this rate, I might reach level 300 before leaving this place. Hopefully, I get to fight the dragons here. He looked at the shell-shocked elves and realized he would have to further explain himself, rather than get lost in his thoughts. Emil was the one disguised as the boss monster, and yes, their fight with her was real, but she didn't die. It was all just an act. The hallucinogenic effects of some of the flowers were utilized by Ray to trick the senses of the girls to think they were actually killing the monsters, when in actuality, they weren't doing anything of the sort. So you drugged them. That's why they were behaving so violently. No. The hallucinogen only fools the senses. It doesn't control actions or emotions. I didn't make you do anything you wouldn't have done in that constructed scenario. To make sure they saw what he wanted them to see, he gave them the prompt of what would happen before he rendered them unconscious. That guaranteed that when they woke up, their minds would be operating on that assumption, so they would perceive what they were primed to see. Still, he had Emil disguise herself as the boss, just in case their imagination wasn't enough. As for all the minerals in the dungeon, including all of the flowers, I took them into my domain. And by domain, I mean the Grand Calamity class dungeon that I really need to make into a hideout. He couldn't reveal most of these details to the elves, but he was communicating everything to Esm through her mind, so the information she received was different from what he told the rest of them. Back when he was executing the plan, one of the things he was mostly worried about was the possibility that the elves found out they were being played. After all, if he took all the resources in the dungeon, the effects on gravity would cease, and they would be able to move normally without his assistance. Also, they would be able to tell that the dungeon was barren. Thankfully, the effects of the flowers which he fed to them after they were unconscious was potent enough to make them see things differently. Just to be safe, he constructed false plants through magic, and replaced the actual minerals with replicas that looked identical to the real deal but were simply polished or dyed stones. It was a lot of hard work, and it no doubt paid off. I'll never let them find out the details of what I did. I'll have to repopulate the dungeon with summoned monsters at least the first couple of floors so it looks occupied. That way, no one will suspect my actions. At least, not until he was done with the elves. The wealth he had just obtained from the dungeon was definitely more than he bargained for, and he considered everything more than enough to save his business. But, since I don't know the exact figures and logistics, I had Kara go through everything and audit their value for me. It had only been some hours since then, and he heard that Kara was already done with it. That girl works fast with her brain. He smiled to himself, though as soon as he did this, he noticed Esm's countenance change a little. It only lasted for a fraction of a second, but Ray could have sworn that she had given him a look of disapproval. In any case, Emil is with Kara right now, and once I'm done concluding the deal with the elves, they'll return and give me a report on everything that happened. Ray was trying his best to act cautiously and not be too optimistic, but with the way things were looking, he was already solving the problems he came to the Eastern continent for. The business stuff is pretty much fixed, though I'm sure Kara will have some ideas on how to gain even more profit. As for having elves as my allies, I think I've figured out their weakness. He smiled as he remembered how he made all of them react from his scent. That alone made Gratiana subservient to him, and he figured he could take over the rest of the elves with that method. The only things left are finding out more information and curing Alicia. And in all honesty, they were both tied to one entity. The very entity that watched over this land, and still refused to show their face. The Oracle. That's the last piece of the puzzle. So far, while Ray had played some games with the elves, he had made sure not to make them break their long-held taboo. He didn't allow them to kill, and that wasn't only because he wanted all the EXP to himself. I can't allow the Oracle, whoever they are, to be upset at me. Yes, he acted a little wickedly by deceiving the elves, but he had his justifications for his actions. It didn't look like it now, but a lot of his actions were also going to benefit the elves in the long run. So, as long as he didn't cross the line, he was sure he could still justify himself in the eyes of the Oracle. Still, something bothered him. If the Oracle indeed saw all that happened in the continent, they were probably aware of the plunder he made in the dungeon. Yet they aren't informing these elves of my lies. Why? Why do they still choose not to interfere? Ray wondered to himself. What exactly is this Oracle? What is this connection they have with the elves? More than ever, Ray had to know. Chapter 633, Exploration of Passion. How boring. Katerin and Shaya entered their suite with tired expressions on their faces. The look of both disdain and disgust on their faces was overshadowed by the exhaustion they felt after walking through the human city. Of course, this wasn't physical exhaustion by any means. As dragon generals, their physical prowess far exceeded the threshold it would take to get tired from walking. The kind they felt was the feeling of mental exhaustion. Being around so many filthy humans sucks. It took all of my self-control not to explode and just destroy all of them. Dragons had always been taught that they were the most superior race in H-Tray, and that the world was theirs for the taking. Not only that, but they had the compulsion to constantly take the lives of the weak. It was ingrained in them both by nature and by nurture. As such, being in a bustling city of humans was akin to throwing a hungry person into a pen full of livestock. It took the strongest level of self-control to resist the call to devour or at least destroy the pathetic humans. Hugh. Katerin collapsed on her bed, while Shaya sat on the floor, crossing her legs similarly to a bow. After both girls rested, not speaking for a few seconds, Katerin finally spoke up. We were able to find some relevant information, though. The fact that the humans here have summoned otherworlders, who are mighty enough to slay dragons. The fact that some of these otherworlders dwell in the capital. And also the fact that the strongest of them is away at the moment. After using her on so many people, making them do her bidding. They easily spilled the beans about the city and everything that had gone on within it over the course of the past few months. It all makes sense now. The The humans could never have killed a dragon lord. It was the otherworlders all along. I'm sure the master would be glad to know all of this. As for specific information regarding the otherworlders, there seemed to only be 4 who were somewhat reachable. And only 3 were in the capital at the moment. With the strongest being absent from the capital, and the scarce number of threats to the dragons that existed, this was indeed the perfect opportunity that Lady Freyja was waiting for. But, from the way they were described, they seem like rather difficult opponents. Regular tricks won't work on them. And while they probably wouldn't stand a chance against our full might, we are forbidden from attacking the capital. As such, despite finding such damning information about humanity enough to make the race sink, the dragons could do nothing about it. How frustrating! Katerin groaned. Indeed. I was hoping to finish this mission quickly, but it seems we have to find more information before we can communicate our findings to Master. Shaya responded with another sigh. As much as I don't want to agree with you, you're right. They couldn't waste the time of a dragon lord, who was definitely busy with other actions. To prove their competence, they had to take independent action. Or perhaps by telling her, she can guide us on the next step to take. Are you saying we can't figure that out by ourselves? We're an elite unit, you know. True. The girls were stuck in a dilemma, but without having any outlet for their frustrations, it only kept eating at them. Until... Both girls turned to the door at the same time, and as soon as they did, they heard a soft knock on the door. They looked at each other for a moment, and Katerin's smile grew wide, almost beast-like, as she easily knew who was knocking. Come in. She called out to the front door, and a second later, it was open. The lady that entered into the room was the very definition of gorgeous, perfectly sculpted as an epitome of beauty. As her crimson hair flowed behind her, and her pure black suit clung tightly to her body, she flexed her glasses as she made her entry. I heard you had returned, and decided to come attend to you. Is there perhaps anything you two would like? Refreshments, perhaps? She asked, her head bowed. No. Human food tastes awful. Shaya yelled, almost like a whining child. Her thin voice echoed in the air, but the bowing receptionist did not flinch in her bow. Her face was obscured by her hair as she looked at the ground, waiting for the words of Shaya's partner. Want to know what I really want? What do you desire, miss? Her alluring voice called out. At this point, Katerin could no longer hold back her lust. All her growing frustrations for the day culminated into deep desire for the human before her, and the power to suppress it was long gone. Raise your head. The redhead instantly obeyed, revealing her beautiful face. Come over here. She obeyed, walking slowly as the door closed behind her, until she reached the base of the bed where Katerin now stood in. Strip for me. Once again. The lady obeyed, completely disrobing to display her immaculate body, the ebony skin gleaming like jewels under the suite's lights. Come here. Sit next to me. As Retta, the girl in question, obeyed this order, Shaya couldn't help but look excited as well. She slowly began to rise from where she sat and went to stay beside the girl. Now sandwiched between the two dragons, with no possible way of escape, Retta emotionlessly obeyed her orders to the letter. Then, before long, the action began. Hum. AHH. HAAA. Steamy breaths, followed by kissing and suckling sounds, echoed in the room as the ladies began to engage in rather unspeakable activities. Their silhouettes danced as they occupied the bed, enjoying one another's bodies to their fill. The pinnacle of passion was explored that very moment, with the women completely letting go of their frustrations to drown in pleasure. unaware of what was really happening. Asterisk. Thanks for reading. It is related to plot, I swear. I also did my best to make it as less explicit as I could. Chapter 634, Connections in High Places. That was amazing. Fucking awesome. I had a blast. As the two dragon girls Katerin and Shaya lay on the bed, arms wrapped around each other, and the girl that lay in their center, they couldn't help but show their true selves. This whole thing has just made me so stressed. But, all of that just washed away with just one round. Katerin looked at Retta, pecking her cheek as she fondled her boobs even more. You're a natural at this. Why don't I give you a reward for your services? The ebony beauty smiled, blushing slightly as soon as she was praised. Slowly parting her lips, she made her request known. I want to be of service to you. Let me be of more use to you. Katerin raised her brows as she looked at the girl before her. Made it so that the target was bound to the caster, and would therefore engage in actions related to her orders and the overall will of the one who was in control. So, yes. This made all kinds of sense. What kind of use can you be to me, though? You're just a simple receptionist, aren't you? Other than your body, you can't offer me much, can you? Katerin said this, but Rita's body was unlike anything she had ever experienced in her entire life. She had explored girls from other races before, including humans, though out of curiosity, but ended up disliking all of those experiences. In the end, she had to conclude that dragon girls were the best partners. Until I met you. Katrin's mouth began to water once again. Retta simply oozed sex appeal, and now that she had finally gotten a taste, the dragon general realized that she had been wrong all along. Not even Shaya, the one she was most compatible with, compared to this human when it came to the kind of pleasure she derived from the experience. I'm sure Shaya also feels the same. Just look at how happy she looks. More than anything now, Katerin wanted to take Retta with her when she was returning to the Empire. She was going to be her toy for life. I have connections too, you know? You mentioned something about needing more information about the city, right? I have friends in high places. Ah, yes. Katerin smiled sheepishly, remembering how she kept blabbering all the secrets of their operation in the presence of the human as they climaxed together. There was no harm done, though. She's under my control and will keep shut about all activities in here. As for her claim, it seems far-fetched. Still, Katerin found the girl to be too cute, so she decided to humor her. What kind of connections? The Otherworlders. I know one of them. Oh, really? As soon as Katerin heard this, she jumped to her feet in pleasant surprise. Her eyes were bulging, and her mouth parted wide. The reason she so easily believed Retta was because it was literally impossible for the girl to lie to her. Just earlier, when she mentioned her friends in high places, Katerin discounted it as just a commoner overestimating the value of their connection. But an Otherworlder? That was an unexpected game changer. You really know the Otherworlders? The saviors of humanity. The gears within her brain was beginning to turn as she examined the prospect of this discovery. If I can use this girl to get to the Otherworlders, and I get them under my control, then that would be more than good news for the master. The problem was that the Otherworlders were probably not going to be so accessible, and even if they were, what were the chances of her skills working on them? There were so many things to consider, including the danger of keeping Retta close if she was chummy with the Otherworlders. Still, this was better than nothing. Not those ones. I'm friends with a deserter. Deserter? At this point, Shaya spoke up, finally recovering from the last vestiges of pleasure that coursed through her body. Even Katerin was curious about this statement. The public doesn't know the full details, but there were a lot more otherworlders that were summoned. However, most of them deserted the alliance, hence becoming deserters. Interesting. Go on. Katerin's grin began to expand. I know one of them. According to what she told me, 4 of her other friends are in the capital. They want to take over the alliance, and I'm currently working as their spy. The juicy details were making Katerin wet again, and her excitement was reaching a new height as she watched Retta explain everything in full. Once more information was added, both Katerin and Shaya looked at each other and nodded. So, you're saying there's currently a conspiracy to take down the current royal council by both the nobles and the otherworlders. And it's going to happen very soon. Retta nodded her head like an innocent little girl, making Katerin bite her lip in excitement. This is perfect. She laughed out loud. All we have to do is manipulate those otherworlders and nobles to wreck the capital for us. Not only did they not have to attack the capital themselves, but if they played their cards right, the entirety of humanity could self-destruct under their proper guidance. Everything seemed to align perfectly. AHH. I'm in the mood again. Let's go another round. You read my mind. Both Katerin and Shaya pounced on the girl at their center, and then resumed their rather unchanged affairs. Moans, groans, and grunts filled the air, as well as certain sounds that flesh made when they rubbed against each other. Once again, the room had become a haven of pleasure with the red-haired certain man watching them from a seat not too far from the bed. And with that, the wheels have begun to turn. His deep voice echoed in the room, though none of the 2 girls in the room could see him. They were busy kneeling before him, pleasuring themselves as he stared at them with cold eyes. Now then. What should I do next? Chapter 635, Conspiracy Among Otherworlders. So, how did the meeting go? Felicia and her friends Byron, Livia, Devin, and Caden sat and discussed in her room, as they often did at this point. As the leader of the deserted otherworlders, she had pretty much made her place of rest their hideout of sorts, albeit a temporary one. Their stay in the royal estate was limited, so they wouldn't be here for long. Still, at least for the moment, they were privy to the facilities of the estate as esteemed personnel of the highly regarded nobles. Their rooms weren't as fancy as that of the otherworlders, but it was certainly much better than their abode in the houses of the nobles they worked for. It just went to show the disparity in wealth and power that the royal council had, or perhaps how well the latter was willing to treat their guests. Regardless, that wasn't the topic for discussion. It was something else. You mean the meeting with our new backer? Yes, it's going well. The Reaper Group has decided to fund our new venture. As soon as she said this, the teenagers practically fist-bumped and leapt for joy. As everyone in the alliance knew at this point, the Reaper Group was the hot new stuff around. They held so much financial influence, but were also politically relevant. Not only did they personally supply the Royal Council with items thus contributing to the war against the dragons, but they had managed to make connections with practically every noble that the group knew. They had their reach in every facet of the nation at some point, which made Felicia suspicious. It's a good thing I acted on my instincts and confronted that worker of theirs who eventually spilled everything after just a kiss. Licking her lips, Felicia grinned widely. The honest truth was that the Reaper Group was looking to take over the alliance as well. And since they had a much better plan and more influence than the nobles who were greedily eyeing the position of the Royal Council, the Reaper Group was a much better group to latch onto. Those old farts lacked the resolve. Plus, they're too stupid and entitled to come up with a coherent plan to take over anything. Livia said with a brutal smile on her face. Despite having a gentle face, everyone knew just how blunt and harsh she could be. Right? If the Reaper Group is our sponsor, we can be sure to have both the financial and political help to achieve our goals. Devin added. Everyone in the group nodded at this. The most important thing is that the group has the trust of the Royal Council. Vita and Conrad don't trust the nobles, but since they've kept the Reaper Group close, they won't expect treachery from them. The intricate web of connections that the Reaper Group had managed to establish, that this plan of theirs must have taken them a long time to make. By subsidizing the weapons sold to the Royal Council, while also bearing construction costs for the capital, they already knew what their actions would get them. What were the chances that they were the top business in the alliance, despite only surfacing only some months ago? No. The group was certainly run with agendas in mind, and one constructed by a rather intelligent leader. So, did you meet the leader of the Reaper Group, or just an affiliate? Byron asked, chuckling excitedly as he wanted to know more. You idiot. You think the leader would easily reveal himself like that? They've been planning this for so long. Of course, they'd opt to remain hidden. Rebel was merely the outward leader of the Reaper Group, serving to conceal the true mastermind who ran everything from the shadows. He was the one she had a meeting with. Within a week, we'll make our move. The Reaper Group is already amassing their resources, and they've also managed to enslave 2 dragons who will assist us in our endeavor. T2 what? D dragons. Are you serious? Caden looked a little worried as he stared at Felicia, but she shrugged everything off and smiled. Relax. I kissed him and confirmed the effects of my skill. He was telling the truth, and they have the dragons under their control. Her tone was casual, laced with so much pride and power, that her followers had to believe and trust her. During our next meeting, the dragons will show up and we'll further discuss the details of the plan. If all worked well, the dragons would get blamed for the chaos that would ensue in the city, including the demise, or at least permanent incapacitation of the otherworlders. Once the dust settles, we will rise and become the new heroes of the people. During this process, we have to eliminate Conrad and Vita. Since we are otherworlders, the curse won't activate if we do the job. We could also use the dragons to do it. The previous plan with the nobles had them taking on the more gruesome roles due to their strength and nature as otherworlders, but with the Reaper Group's involvement, there wasn't even a need to stain their hands. What of our classmates? Caden asked with a raised brow. What do you plan on doing with Justin and the rest? Do you think we should bring them on our side? Livia asked. They could be useful to us. Everyone knew Livia was saying this because she had a crush on Justin, but no one said anything to imply their knowledge. Instead, Felicia rubbed her chin and creased her brow for a moment. Then, she spoke. Having them on our side will indeed be beneficial. It's not like I'm a heartless monster that wants to see her classmates die or something. In fact, she would have preferred it if no one had to die. But the Reaper Group was pretty insistent on the calamity that had to be wrought upon the capital in order to ensure a proper transition to their rule. It's crazy how they helped develop the city, only to desire its destruction once again. Devin chuckled. The rest of the teenagers laughed at this, with Felicia smiling the brightest. Don't worry, guys. This alliance with them is also temporary. All we need is their assistance, and once we get what we want. They all nodded in agreement and steeled their hearts. The Reaper Group will be under our control as well. Chapter 636, The Elven Community. Crunching sounds echoed atop the hills as the group climbed in silence. The leader of the group was Gratiana, leader of the Elven Guardians of the western shore of the continent. Behind her were the 48 elves that she led, and all of them were ascending the rather tall hill. The deep and thick forest had grown distant behind them, and their gaze was set on something that existed beyond this final obstacle of theirs. Finally, after reaching the top of the hill, they cast their gazes down and set their eyes on the civilization that existed below. The elven community. The sight itself was breathtaking. From the apex of a towering hill, one could behold the radiant world woven into the verdant embrace of nature's splendor. A mix of colors danced beneath the azure sky, as the sun's golden rays caressed the lush foliage and kissed the earth below. The community sprawled across the landscape gracefully, spreading for at least a mile, while surrounded by a barricade of flowers and lush plants. The kinds of houses that stood at the center of this plain were made seemingly out of a mix of stone and plants. There was nowhere you would look that evidence of nature couldn't be seen. At the center of the community was a massive structure. The compound alone took up a lot of space, but the building itself was not as small or compact as the others that surrounded it. That was the shrine, the place where the elves went to worship nature, or perhaps to commune with the oracle. The place appeared sacred, more sacred than the rest of the houses that littered the community. Based on sheer size and mass alone, the population had to be a few hundred thousands. A considerable figure indeed, but nothing compared to races such as humans whose population was at least in the millions. The abodes here were spread out, though, with every home having their own compound, and more than enough space for leisure. All in all, as primitive as it seemed, this place was a paradise, a haven of nature. Everything about the community could be succinctly expressed in a single word: beautiful. As the elves cast their gaze on their home with pride and a strong sense of affection, they slowly shifted their gaze to a group of 3 humans, who were standing on a completely different hill while also staring down at their society. Ray, Asm, and Kara, all 3 of them were smiling as they looked at the elven community. Gratiana gulped as she looked at the 3 humans. This is the first time that humans have laid eyes on our community before. I will surely be punished by the esteemed council. Unless. Her eyes focused on Ray, whose expression of pure confidence made her clutch her chest a little. Gratiana felt a bit of cognitive dissonance within her. On one end, she still desired to uphold the will of her people, as well as the rules established by the community. However, she also wanted to do the will of the man who had managed to conquer her. Both of these contrasting positions made her unable to arrive at a decision. Still, deep within herself, she had a certain thought. I wish you good success in your endeavor, Ray. As expected of Ader. He described it well enough. This is the real deal. Ray smiled to himself as he looked at the world that spread out beneath him. In this place, there were hundreds of thousands of elves, previously a lot more before the war reached such a state of intensity. As the sunset bathed the community, he felt it depict a certain kind of beauty that a modern city could not offer. Ray wasn't emotional about the sight or anything, but he found it pretty nonetheless. It's here that I will proceed with the second phase of the plan. After his deal with the elves, he had called back Kara and Emil, and the former was able to give him the gist of the situation. We have more than enough mineral resources, but that isn't all we can obtain from this place. Ray's thoughts trailed as he recollected the details of what Kara told him. The dungeon that exists here is only the symptom of the true goodies that exist on this continent. Somewhere in this place is a pocket full of incredible mana and even rarer, purer minerals. But that wasn't all there was to obtain here. The magic that the elves possess, specifically runic magic, would really help in the production of the raw materials and refining them into the perfect tools. Currently, while the Reaper group had the best equipment possible for the production of enchanted items through refinement of raw materials even better than the royal councils, they still fell short when it came to processing materials as pure as the kind found in the eastern continent. Apparently, the last time they refined the minerals we got as a reward from the elves, they ended up overworking the machines. If they desired to work on schedule, and also consistently churn out quality products, they had to seek out a more sustainable means of production. According to Kara, the best way to do this is to build a refinery here, using that pocket of goodies here as a base to power the refinery. Spatial magic could be used for the transportation of raw materials, and even final products, which was why runes were essential for better use, and effective management of resources. All of this required, more than anything, the cooperation of the elves. I sincerely doubt the elves will agree to any of what Kara proposes unless I have them under my control. Still, it's not like there are no other ways to go about things. Her suggestion just works the best and saves costs. Plus, they could evade a lot of taxes, while keeping their production sites safe from sabotage from competitors or any other party with malintent. The first thing is to find the oracle and get a cure for Alicia. Once that is done, we can proceed with the refinery idea. Ray could feel himself slowly getting impatient as he looked at the civilization that had all of his answers. Just wait a little longer, Alicia.